Hello everyone, I am Fatma Arif, a part time communications and marketing professional and a full time nerd. I'm going to be the host of Mixtape, a podcast that wants to explore stories that educate, communicate, and entertain. For the first episode of the podcast, I have invited a group of my friends who are as interested in the subject of storytelling as I am, and will be sharing how it has impacted them in various ways. We are joined by Wajiha Haider, who is a journalist and works at the News on Sunday, Hammad Anwar, who is the founder of Sukhan, which is a digital media platform, and he's also involved with another few digital platforms that focus on sports. We then have Aroosa Shaukat, who is also a journalist, and last but not the least, Shanal Kazi. She's a lawyer turned creative whose work experience includes the corporate sector as well as the development sector, and she loves writing about art. So, I'll just start with asking as to what storytelling means to you all personally, and then we'll take it from there. So, Vajiha, how about you start?
Okay, so as the name signifies, storytelling is about telling stories. And as humans, we love stories, we love telling stories. We are united through stories. Stories, they have the power to transform us in so many ways. I mean, when you tell stories, you in part tell stories for yourself to preserve a part of your life that you can, perhaps not preserve otherwise. Have you ever noticed how, if you keep a journal, when you go back and read it, you can sort of relive the whole thing, and exactly how it happened, uh, in exactly the manner, uh, and then you tell stories for others. You don't know who would need your specific story someday. You don't know, but you can, the story, by the story that you tell, can save someone someday. It might be the thing, it might be the thing that they are looking for. So basically, I think that, since human beings are endowed with language, they have this need, this compelling need to share, or to tell a story, to tell their story. So yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting about storytelling, and I think we'll talk about it as we go ahead in the podcast about how it's specifically connected to your work, given that your work mostly revolves around sort of literary
Yeah.
side of journalism. So, Hamad, would you like to take up and share what storytelling sort of means?
रिहा ने बड़ा आई थिंक बड़े अच्छे तरीके से जो है उसको एक्सप्लेन किया है फॉर मी स्टोरी टेलिंग इज समथिंग जो कि आई थिंक हमारा अर्लीस्ट एक्सपोजर होता है और उसकी डिफरेंट फॉर्म से हमारा एक्सपोजर होता रहता है बट जिस तरह आपका 6 हफ्ते का बच्चा हो या आपका 6 महीने का बच्चा हो या 6 साल का हो सो दिस इज समथिंग दैट वी आर एक्सपोज टू वन फॉर्म और द अदर कभी वो कॉमिक्स के थ्रू होता है आजकल यूट्यूब वीडियोस के थ्रू होता है एंड दिस इज how children basically learn how to learn different narratives and how to build a narrative. आप किसी बच्चे से जब वो वापस आते हैं स्कूल से या वो वापस आते हैं एकेडमी से या कहीं से भी तो वो आपको आके उस तरह की चीज़ पूरी सुना रहे होते हैं अपने दिन की रुदात तो इट्स मोर लाइक अ स्टोरी टेलिंग थिंग हाँ उसके डिफरेंट फॉर्म्स हैं जिसपे आई एम श्योर हम आगे बात करेंगे विजुअल स्टोरी टेलिंग की क्या अहमियत है कॉमिक्स क्या है किस स्टेज पे क्या चीज़ ज़्यादा अट्रैक्ट करती है but I think storytelling for me would be how you build your narrative, how you tell a narrative, और that goes long way. क्योंकि जो चीज़ें हम बचपन में सीखते हैं जो आप उनको यूनिवर्सल वैल्यूज कह लो आप उनको रिलीजियस वैल्यूज कह लो जो हमें स्टोरी टेलिंग के थ्रू नानी दादी टीवी यूट्यूब नेटफ्लिक्स आजकल जो कुछ हमें सिखा रहा है that's what we are going to grow up with.
Rusa, you want to add on to it?
Yeah, so I think, like Hamad mentioned, I think I've always been one of those बच्चे जिनकी बात कर रहे थे हमाद के स्कूल से वापस आके लंबी चौड़ी कहानियां सारे दिन की. So I think it's so integral to the entire concept of being a human. You find it so relatable कि आप अपनी किसी कहानी के थ्रू किसी से कनेक्टेड फील करते हैं, या when you hear them tell you a story or tell talk about their experience, you feel connected in so many ways. um Obviously, I mean, for everyone, I know we'll possibly be touching upon this later, but I think it becomes even more integral if your work is more associated with it as well. So I guess for the past 10 years, so I've found storytelling very fascinating because of uh, uh, the profession I'm in as well. But yeah, I think storytelling is like this magical concept of, you just like full of possibilities and um, full of ideas and imagination. Like in fact, you sort of let go of your imagination. Um, so I think मेरे लिए तो storytelling का concept जो है वो ऐसा लगता है कि you relate to it so much. So yeah, I think for me storytelling has always been an integral part of being a human. It's sort of like a human experience, sort of like an inherent habit of sorts. So yeah.
Yeah, that's, I think, one of the things that everybody sort of relates to, specifically in this group. Shanal, what about you? Just share how storytelling um, has been sort of part of your personal journey.
So, hi everyone. I hope you guys can hear me fine. So basically, when I associate, when I say the word storytelling or someone says storytelling, like immediately, like my mind goes to uh, there's two kinds of people. We've always met them. They're those kind of people who can tell a very boring story very, very interestingly. Like they have the knack. They can either, make it into a story, whether that's your nani or dadi or koi uncle hai or koi cousin hai. They just have this way of where you just don't want to stop listening to them. You know how they make it intriguing. And then there's those people who kind of don't have that knack, and probably if it was an interesting story, it didn't come out to be that. So I feel like storytelling is also like an art, whether that's music or whether that's it's an art of expression that I feel that I don't know, in some way, especially if you see in theater, um, if someone's, if an actor is performing and, he has an interactive audience, the audience says, the audience laughs, the audience boos, or the audience gives any kind of, comment or anything like that, he's pumped and fueled by that even further. So I think storytelling is like, it's not a one-way process. I think it's such a mutual conversation between two people, and it's also a way of certain people to kind of connect to somebody, and also the need for expression and I think appreciation. Like a lot of people know they're good storytellers and they want to be appreciated. It's like this conversation which is not expressively mutual, but it's like that's what storytelling has meant. Like for me, I think I inherited this from my dad or whoever. But I remember when we were kids and we traveled to any new place or a new restaurant or new whatever. My dad would always try to strike up a conversation with a waiter or with a person or anybody who sort of is in that place, and he would love to find out stories. And I think I grew up with that same knack. I always want to know something about somebody. And wherever I travel, I always try to get like very off the beaten track, go to a little shop, find out their story. Where are you from? What do you do? This, that, make conversation. It's a way of connection. I feel it's like it's just, and it happens in every culture, in every form, whether that's verbal or written or music or art or anything. It's just like expression. I feel in a very good way, in a performative way, not in a boring way. That's what I associate storytelling with since I was a kid.
Yeah, so this is something very interesting that you have touched upon, and all the different sort of mediums that you have sort of covered in what you just said, uh, be it from, a proper storytelling session with your grandparents, or just, striking up a conversation with a waiter. So these are all various forms of storytelling. So my next question would be, share your preferred mode of storytelling. Uh, something that, because it's been such a diversified medium, specifically now. We started off from like the traditions of oral storytelling, and then, the written word uh, became the new thing, and then the visual medium came up, and now even the visual medium has like so many diversifications. uh, Given that, we stream things now, we no longer even have the time or the stamina to go through commercials for a regular TV session. So what are your like preferred storytelling mediums these days, that you think that you connect with the most? Shanal, you can start with it.
Yeah, I think, this is a really, really tough one because I would say that, ordinarily it would be like reading, but I feel like I don't get that kind of kick with reading other people's writing so much as I do, I think, with kind of, spoken word. So if it's poetry or if it's anyone talking, I feel like I can, the audio, or if it's a song or music, I think that's my, it's just such a, it's a more moving way of storytelling because you can feel the emotions, you can feel how the person is feeling. I think for me that would have to be it, rather than, as opposed to reading, because up to reading ka bhi, I think our attention spans have also decreased, and with, we have podcasts and we have all kinds of audio books and these kind of things. I feel like that's probably what gets to me and gets to my heart, really, like hearing it. So it's poetry. I love going for poetry hearings. We don't have so many over here, that is a definite form. Just basically raw. It's just coming from, an unfiltered place, I feel.
So, books are, my favorite form of storytelling. Like, Fran Lebowitz says books are always better than reality. But it's not the only way to tell a story. For example, these days I have been drawn to stories told through photographs. For example, Instagram पे जैसे होती हैं, like, इतनी gorgeous pictures होती हैं, each telling a different but equally beautiful story. Stories that, stories of love and loss and redemption, and so many other stories. So basically, what I feel is that, once you start opening up, to the magic of stories, um, you'll see that you'll find the story that you need in exactly the form that you need it in. For example, in my I take care of a travel page, at work. And there are so many stories that you come across, by talking, as Shanal was also, saying, by talking to people. There's so much you learn when you travel somewhere, and you want to tell those stories to people. You want to convey these stories to people in some manner. So maybe sometimes you don't need a book to escape, but a letter, or an interview, or a art performance, or even a podcast, to relate to. Um, I think that despite its many shortcomings, we are quite lucky that the modern world gives us, such immense freedom to choose, and to choose and to indulge in so many various forms of.
Aroosa?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah.
हाँ,
अच्छा, आप just connect, start with, your preferred mode of storytelling.
अच्छा. So I think for me it largely depends on the story being told. So it necessarily can't always be um the written story, as in like books हमेशा नहीं होंगी, या television या movie का medium नहीं होगा, या हमेशा it won't be an audio version, या the spoken word, या conversation. So it depends. इसकी एक छोटी सी example मेरे ज़हन में बाबर आ रही थी. So lately क्या, it's been quite a few years since ये जो modern love का एक वो चला था. So there'll be some stories you'd really enjoy reading in their column, but then there'd be some stories you'd really enjoy just hearing on the podcast. And when their web series came out, I think, was it a web series or was it an Amazon series? Okay. when that series came out, there were some stories you actually enjoyed just, the visual experience of it. So I think for me, it's always been about uh, the specific story, the character of the story. For instance, uh, I think even now, ये जो social media की age है, इसमें you'll see at times you'll feel a single picture telling you a very detailed story, जो कि otherwise I think would be very difficult in a face-to-face conversation. So I think for me, it's not it's very difficult to sort of just select one form or of storytelling. It's a combination, and I think it sort of depends on what works best for you at a given time, or what sort of works best for a specific story.
या ट्रू गिवन कि इतने सारे मीडियम्स हैं आई थिंक आपको स्टोरी जैसे एक जमाना था जब ऑडियो बुक्स का एक टाइम आया था इवन दो आई हैव नेवर बीन एबल टू सॉर्ट ऑफ टेक ऑन ऑडियो बुक्स पॉडकास्ट इन जनरल ऑन स्पेसिफिक डिफरेंट सब्जेक्ट्स आई कैन मैनेज लेकिन ऑडियो बुक्स मेरे से मैनेज नहीं होती बट आई थिंक एवरी स्टोरी का कम्युनिकेशन मेथड डिफरेंट होना उसका इम्पैक्ट ऑल्सो प्लेज अ पार्ट Hamad, you can take this up.
या सो आई थिंक एक तो रूसा ने जो बात की थी बड़ी सही थी कि हर चीज आप इंजॉय डिफरेंट तरह करते हैं फॉर एग्जांपल अगर मैंने जो कि अभी होपफुली हम आगे भी देखेंगे और प्रोजेक्ट जब रिलीज होगा बट अगर अपने ट्रेडिशनल पढ़नी है दास्तान मीर हमजा और त्रेसम शुबा सो वी आई थिंक आई पर्सनली आई प्रेफर रीडिंग देम क्योंकि मुझे लगता है उसका एक चार्म है आप एक मैजिकल वर्ल्ड अपने माइंड में क्रिएट करते हो सो दैट इज अ वेरी पावरफुल एंड ट्रेडिशनल फॉर्म ऑफ स्टोरी टेलिंग मुशर्रफ अली फारूकी की जो लेटेस्ट बुक थी वो भी उसी जॉनरा में लिखी गई थी सो वो आपको दास्तान गोई जो किस्सा गोई जिसे कहते हैं उस जब फॉर्म को हम देखते हैं तो वो पढ़ने में बहुत ज्यादा मजा आता है बट इन रिसेंट टाइम्स और जो आजकल जिस तरह के ट्रेंड चल रहा है जिस दुनिया में और जिस एरा में हम रह रहे हैं सो पर्सनली आई लव एनिमेशंस किसी भी फॉर्म में हो 2D एनिमेशन 3D एनिमेशन and so I think that is the strongest form of visual storytelling nowadays बच्चों के लिए वो डिफरेंट अपील करती है एट द सेम टाइम जब आप उसको लेके आते हैं एट अ ग्रोन अप लेवल तो फिर कॉमिक्स आ जाते हैं कॉमिक्स के आगे फिर एनिमेटेड सीरीज हैं सो दैट इज समथिंग आई थिंक दैट इज अ वेरी पावरफुल मीडियम और ये ओवर द टाइम ग्रो कर रहा है क्योंकि अगर 2022 तक जो हम देख रहे हैं फेसबुक कहता है कि उसका सारा का सारा जो कंटेंट कंज्यूम हो रहा है वो 80% विजुअल फॉर्म में होगा सो वी कैन क्लियरली सी कि ये ट्रेंड किस तरफ जा रहा है बुक पढ़ने का अपना मजा है पोइट्री भी वहीं पर है सारी चीजें एग्जिस्ट करती हैं और करेंगी दे आर नॉट गोइंग एनीवेयर बट द काइंड ऑफ अपब्रिंगिंग हमारी अगली जनरेशन की हो रही है उसमें आई थिंक इफ वांट टू रीच आउट टू देम सो एनिमेशन is the most powerful storytelling medium we have right now or as someone who actually worked on a bit on animation direction पे writing पे comics पे so we have personally seen कि किस तरह लोग उसको रिएक्ट करते हैं किस तरह हमारी एक जो वीडियो है फूड वेस्टेज पे वो 2 मिलियन तक उसकी आउटरीच हो जाती है व्यूज आ जाते हैं ऑर्गेनिकली सो पर्सनली आई विल से कि एनिमेशन 2D 3D बच्चों की बड़ों की is the most powerful storytelling medium.
So moving on, the next point that I would like to discuss is using storytelling in your sort of professional side of your life. Whatever work you do, be it covering political journalism hai, CSR hai, general digital content creation hai. So all of these sort of touch upon one form or another of storytelling. So share a bit about your experience, personal experience. Koi, if you want to share some, if you can take names or want to sort of give specific examples, do that of how you firsthand saw storytelling creating a massive impact. If you want to just use some that personal experience and it's like generalized tone mein you want to share with the audience, do that. So Aroosa, because your the sort of journalistic work you have done is sort of थोड़ा hardcore जिसको हम कहते हैं या mainstream या political journalism के साथ associated हो. So just share how storytelling fits in there. Because the general impression तो वहाँ पे यही है कि जी you ask a question and somebody gives an answer and that's
Yeah. So I think there are so many ways in which storytelling is so intertwined with the concept of journalism, and not just political, yeah, heartbeat, yeah, hardcore journalism, any sort of journalism. Basically, एक concept जो कि एक मतलब नया concept नहीं है, काफी पुराना है, लेकिन एक चीज जो एक शुरू हुई है उसमें ये कि जर्नलिस्ट जो हैं वो दे regard themselves as storytellers, and to a very large extent that's true. um, so उसमें उसमें एक जो लिमिटेशन हो जाती है वो एथिकल या कुछ थोड़ी सी वो प्रोफेशनल बाउंड्रीज की आ जाती है, बट इसेंशियली व्हाट यू आर बेसिकली अ स्टोरी टेलर. एंड सो आई थिंक मेरी जो जर्नलिज्म रही है उसमें थोड़ा सा ये आपको रहता है कि because it's largely associated with news and the way news is presented, and and there's this aspect of this very idealistic objectivity that we as journalists are pushed to to work for and sort of aspire as well. उसकी वजह से वो स्टोरी टेलिंग की जो एक एक होती है वो कभी कभार वो एक तशनगी रह जाती है आपको कि it's not as impactful, or हो सकती थी, we could have played with words intro में अपने, we could have pulled in the audience. But having said that, I think I've come across so many journalistic stories, जिसमें you would actually see um, whether it's in print, whether it's on television, broadcast में है, आपको ये feel होता है कि they sort of pull in the audience right at the start. And interestingly so, this is actually taught as well, and this is something which as a journalist you're actually sort of encouraged to do as well. बहुत सारी जो स्टोरीज होती हैं अक्सर पॉलिटिकल में भी होता है, कम स्पेस होती है आई फील, because political is it's all about breaking news and hard news, लेकिन बहुत सारी स्टोरीज होती हैं जिसमें you can actually do that. I think बहुत ही एक छोटी सी एग्जाम्पल, एंड आई थिंक इससे बहुत ज्यादा खूबसूरत और बहुत बेहतरीन एग्जाम्पल्स भी होंगी, बट देयर वाज दिस चिल्ड्रंस फिल्म फेस्टिवल जो कि हर साल होता है, लाहौर में भी होता रहता है, तो शुरू में आई यूज्ड टू कवर दैट एज वेल एज पार्ट ऑफ द द आपका जो डेवलपमेंट सेक्टर होता है, एजुकेशन और एंटरटेनमेंट्स वगैरह भी, तो एज अ कब रिपोर्टर वो मैंने कवर किया था, एंड उसमें सो देयर वाज दिस हॉल फिल्ड विद ऑडिटोरियम फिल्ड विद यंग चिल्ड्रन, और उसमें उन्होंने 2-2 मिनट की बहुत सारी एनिमेशंस दिखाई, एंड द हॉल वाज फिल्ड विद दीज 5 to 8 year olds, और उनके लिए वो एनिमेशंस दिखा रहे थे 2-2 3-3 मिनट दिए कि जिस तरह यू सॉर्ट ऑफ कुछ इमेजेस आपके जहन में रह जाते हैं, एंड आई थिंक that is as journalists I think that sort of pulls you in that art of storytelling as well. कभी कभार बहुत सारी limitations होंगी जो कि वजीहा भी इधर बताना चाहेंगी कि as as journalist, whether you're on the field or whether you're on the desk, you have this a series of limitations जिसकी वजह से आपने नहीं ऐसे नहीं करना, आपने ये words नहीं इस्तेमाल करने, which is all fine and good. But I think even despite all of that, there's always this आपके जहन में as a journalist, you're always stuck with certain images, certain aspects of stories that sort of sort of encourage you to tell a really good story and try to tell you a story in a way जिसमें आपको लगे कि you could sort of make it relatable to people. लेकिन लास्टली छोटी सी चीज ये है कि अब बहुत सारी डॉक्यूमेंट्रीज हो रही हैं, ये जो ब्रॉडकास्ट टेलीविजन है उसमें, बिकॉज दिस अनएंडिंग न्यूज साइकिल जो कि largely rat race लगती है, it doesn't pull in the audience as well despite those fancy graphics and all that. अब आपको जो नजर आ रहा है वो ये इंटरनेशनल मीडिया में आप देखते हैं कि जी 20 मिनट की डॉक्यूमेंट्रीज होगी, 25 मिनट की डॉक्यूमेंट्रीज होगी, एंड they'll focus on hardcore journalism. जिसने इसका फ्लो लिखा होगा वो is someone who has absolutely nothing to do with I don't know, perhaps even यानी ये जो हम जो कहते हैं कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ स्टोरी टेलिंग में ज्यादा हमारे जहन में आते हैं राइटर्स या ऑथर्स या प्रोफेशनल कोई इस तरह के, लेकिन उसमें बात यही हो गई है कि अब आपने उसको एंगेजिंग इसी तरह बनाना है कि वो आपको फील कर होती है ये चीज कि as journalists that is sort of your job as well to not only present a good story but present it in a way that it sort of inspires people to actually listen to it or relate to it. So
Wajiha, would you like to add on to Aroosa's take on journalism?
So basically, Aroosa, I think, Aroosa covered everything, about it,
Yeah,
almost
yeah.
everything. And I agree. I agree. And, when I initially joined journalism, I was in the habit of using vivid language, बहुत ही flowery language. And I got to learn that as a journalist, I could not use that kind of language to report facts. I mean, you grow up reading newspapers, and this is something, you should be aware of, but it somehow reveals itself to you only when you experience it firsthand. But there is a thing called literary reportage where you report the facts, but with all the elements of storytelling, and it fascinates me a lot. It's not really common in Pakistan though. As for an experience from work, I can't think of a specific incident as such, but yeah, from a personal perspective, maybe reading saved me on so many occasions. So many, how do I put it? So many heartaches found their cure on the pages of one book or the other. This year in particular, I decided to read one short story every week and one book, from a different country. And I discovered that even though it was, difficult at first, I did warm up to the practice, and I interestingly, started looking forward to it as well. I had actually been, having difficulty sleeping since last year due to, anxiety regarding, related to the COVID situation and what have you. But following this routine has actually, it actually began taking care of this strange predicament that I was facing. So yeah, it has helped me a lot. Storytelling.
Shanal, you can just jump in here. Given that you have experience in the corporate sector and you have done some work in the CSR side in the development sector as well. So you can you share some like stories about how storytelling can impact or sort of adds to that sort of.
Okay. So basically, with storytelling in my profession, was really, really something that I think that's where my love of writing or telling or listening to stories started, because I was working for Anglo Corporation, which, as you guys know, is like a giant conglomerate and a very big very big corporation, and does all these kind of projects, whether it's food or energy. And I was working in their उनकी mining जो division थी, जो कि एक बहुत ही like derelict जगह है सिंध में, उसका नाम है थरपारकर, which where also my family happens to be from my dad's family, my paternal side. But because of everyone moving out of the city and lack of connection, we kind of that kind of connection disintegrated over time. But over my whole life, I've been hearing stories about Thar growing up, how they used to grow up and how traditions were and how things were. And I think that part of me kind of struck out when I started working for Engro, and so Engro was mining for coal, and in doing so I was on the community development project team, and they ran amazing projects, be it for education, health, skill development, lots of local employment. But one project that was ironically my first project when I walked in, and my first ever time that I professionally went to Thar as part of the Engro team, and not just to visit myself back in 2014, the company simply lined up, okay, we've got to do our mining in this area, and we have to kind of, resettle two villages, and you have to kind of go there, and since you're a local from the area, you speak the language, Sindhi and the regional Thari Dhatki language, talk to the people there, get an idea of what's going on, because no one has really spoken to them, but we have all these plans aligned, and they were great plans to make them a great model village, to make them state-of-the-art housing facilities. And it was so crazy that for the first time I went there with all this pomp and all this, eagerness. Ki, ha, ha, I'm going to get this done. This is just a project and everything. It's my first, so I've got to prove, it so in my career. And I get there and I go to the first house and they sit me down and, you know, I start talking to about resettlement. We'd like to move you in a couple of years to a good village, to a better house, it's gonna be bigger. You're gonna have water access to your bathrooms, all that kind of stuff. And we have somebody, this old woman part of the house. She tells me, come outside with me and let me take you for a little walk. So I thought, okay, sure. It's gonna take me for a little walk. मैं गई उनके साथ, walked around, she stops in, by an old tree and she says, ये जो दरख्त है मैं बचपन से ना इसके नीचे, इसके साये के नीचे बैठी हुई होती हूँ। एंड बचपन से लेके आई एसोसिएट ये दरख्त यहीं पे है, ये जगह यहीं पे है, ये शेड तब से ही दे रही है। शायद मेरे माँ बाप को भी इसी ने शेड दिया, शायद उनके माँ बाप को भी इसी ने शेड दिया। क्या आपके नए विलेज में ये दरख्त होगा? यही दरख्त इसी जगह पे होगा? And obviously I was speechless, and I mean, I think it was just, those were one of the first few stories like that, where people said, okay, great, you guys are doing all this development for us. And, honestly, and honestly, I'm not against industry coming in. This is not my way of saying that, but it's also it put me in such an interesting yet challenging position, because on one hand, I was listening to the stories and वो अपना बना के, because I was from Sindh and I'm from Thar, तो अपना करके कि बेटी की तरह बता के कि हमें ये है और हमारी जो कब्रें हैं उनका क्या होगा, and what's going to happen to our graveyards, have you thought about emotional ties? आप लोगों के लिए तो एक कागज के ऊपर आपने प्रोजेक्ट बनाया, मैप बनाया, ब्लूप्रिंट, हाँ घर बहुत अच्छे जॉब बनाना चाहते हैं, स्कूल बहुत अच्छे जॉब बनाना चाहते हैं, बट क्या हमें आपको ये छोटी छोटी नुआंसेस पता है हमारी जिंदगी के बारे में? And it made me really think that I have such a difficult position of a communicator, because I have to then go and translate those little personalized stories in a manner which is relatable to corporate minds, who are obviously of a different mindset. They are looking at, numbers, and they're looking at statistics, and they're looking at project timelines, and yet they want to do all this amazing work which they have in Thai. But it became so challenging. But I think that's where my eagerness to, and sometimes I would just, write off and kind of community visit schedule hota bhi nahi tha. I would just go off in their houses and, sit with them, get to know their way of life. There's, massive population in Thar is a Hindu population, be it Diwali, Holi, their religious festivities, deaths, births, all these kind of things was on a name-to-name basis. And getting to know their little stories really changed my mind of how industry can, yes, develop a place, but how important these little stories are. And if these erode away, then what happens to our culture? What happens to those stories if they're all kind of never recorded? So I think I really pushed my company, Kichalati, schools, hospitals, that these are all complete essentials. Completely agree. But you guys need to document history, you need to document culture, you need to kind of the musicians there, they're people who jo ke Shah ka Rasala jo hai, it's like basically all of Shah's poetry. There are people who can recite that just by memory. I said we need to put in funds into the cultural preservation aspect and heritage fund to just keep these stories alive. But it's the least we can do, because if industry comes, they can all die down. So I think storytelling really for me became an emotional, like kind of, it was like food for me, like oxygen for me. I needed to know what the other person was feeling and how they were feeling, and I needed to make sure that the other side always knows about it. So that's how kind of I touched upon storytelling in my career, actually.
That's very interesting, and specifically the area that you're talking about, that's something which I think has a very sort of intrigue like factor for the rest of the country as well, because not a lot of good stories or the cultural sort of
Bilkul.
hardcore aspects come out of it. It's काफी stereotypical किस्म की stories come out of come out of from that area. So talking about storytelling and how it's used in the work, I think Hamad, you're in a position to sort of elaborate on this and have some more interesting things to add given your scope of work.
या श्योर बेसिकली मैं आपको 2-3 एग्जांपल्स जो हैं वो दे सकता हूँ यहाँ पे देना चाहूँगा जो कि आई थिंक बड़ी रेलेवेंट है. सो आई बीन फॉर्चूनेट इनफ टू बी पार्ट ऑफ कपल ऑफ इनिशिएटिव, कपल ऑफ स्टार्टअप्स, कपल ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस जो किसी ना किसी फॉर्म में कर रही हैं. माय ओन स्टार्टअप इज आल्सो डूइंग द सेम थिंग, बट आई विल स्टार्ट विद द टाइम लाइक 3-4 years ago when we were making comics. So now we made comics on counter violent extremism. We made a comic on cricket. We made a comic on our national heroes. So different topics, but हम comic का और उसके साथ उसके बाद फिर eventually motion graphics और एनिमेशन का भी काम साथ उसमें ऐड कर रहे थे, उन्हीं चीज़ों पे बिल्ड अपॉन कर रहे थे. So उसमें जो इंटरेस्टिंग बात मेरे सामने ये आ रही थी कि हमारे पास जो रिएक्शन था फ्रॉम लाहौर, वो लाहौर से लोधरा तक, मुल्तान से मुजफ्फरगढ़ तक, इस्लामाबाद से जो है वो साहिवाल तक, वो बड़ा डिफरेंट था. लेकिन एक चीज़ कॉमन थी कि वो सारे उसको एंजॉय कर रहे थे और वो सारे के सारे इसमें इस मीडियम को एंजॉय कर रहे थे. वो सारे के सारे स्टोरी को ना सिर्फ पढ़ रहे थे, देख रहे थे, इमेजिन कर रहे थे, बल्कि उसके बाद उस पर क्रिटिकल जो है वो डिस्कशन भी होती थी. हमने उसमें इस तरह का सिस्टम रखा था कि हम लोग कॉमिक डिस्ट्रीब्यूट करने से पहले भी जा रहे थे, बाद में भी जा रहे थे, एंड वी ट्राइंग टू हैव अ डिस्कशन अराउंड दैट टॉपिक. और जो पोस्ट कैलो रीडिंग सेशन था हमारा, उसके बाद जो डिस्कशन थी वो बहुत ज्यादा उसमें बच्चे अपना पार्टिसिपेट कर रहे थे और अपनी फैमिलीज की, अपने कजन्स की और अपने साथ आने वाले वाकयात बता रहे थे, उससे मिलते जुलते जो हमारे स्टोरी लाइन के थे. एंड द रीजन वाज कि दे कुड सी कि अच्छा यार एक चीज हमारे सामने आई है जो लिखी है किसी ने और हमने पढ़ी है, सो इट्स नॉट जस्ट अस, so they could relate. So when the point I'm trying to make here is that when you bring a story forward, आप उसको इस तरह लेके आते हैं कि अगले जो आपकी ऑडियंस है उससे रिलेट कर सके, उसे समझ सके, तो दैट ऑलवेज ट्रिगर्स कन्वर्सेशन. एंड आई थिंक दैट इज द बेस्ट पार्ट कि अगर आपने एक टॉपिक सामने रखा है, अपना पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू सामने रखा है और उसके जवाब में आपको डिफरेंट तरह के नेटिव मिलते हैं या डिफरेंट तरह के एक्सपीरियंस सुनने को मिलते हैं या सिमिलर एक्सपीरियंस सुनने को मिलते हैं, सो वैलिडेट हो जाता है. तो एक तो कॉमिक्स का, जिससे मैंने पहले बात की थी, तो कॉमिक्स और एनिमेशन का एक बहुत अच्छा एक्सपीरियंस रहा मेरा. सेकंड, इसी पे बिल्ड ऑन करते हुए मैं एक और प्रोजेक्ट है स्टोरी किट के नाम से, वो प्रोग्राम के नाम से एक इनिशिएटिव है, उसके साथ मैं काम कर रहा हूँ. तो उसमें उन्होंने स्टोरी टेलिंग सेशंस किए थे थ्रू आउट पाकिस्तान. सो अब उसमें मुझे ये नजर आ रहा था कि हमारे पास एक जो है सेम स्टोरी पुदीना और कह लें पुदनी और पुदीना की कहानी है. वही कहानी लाहौर में बच्चे सुन रहे हैं, वो कहानी मुल्तान में बच्चे सुन रहे हैं, और वही कहानी आपको कोयटा में हजारा कम्युनिटी और बाकी सारे जो हमारे वहाँ पे कोयटा के डिफरेंट स्कूल है वहाँ पे वो स्टोरीज आपके सामने लाई जा रही हैं. अब सेम स्टोरी है, तो जब सेम स्टोरी हो तो फिर आपके सामने एक इंटरेस्टिंग आ जाता है कि डिफरेंट ग्रुप किस तरह रिएक्ट करते हैं. सब ने एंजॉय किया, इसमें तो कोई शक नहीं है. और उसमें हमारे लाहौर के जो हैं वो अपर क्लास के स्कूल भी शामिल थे, जहाँ पे उर्दू कई दफ़ा उर्दू बोलना जुर्म होता है अगर आप उर्दू के पीरियड में बात नहीं कर रहे, तो वहाँ पे भी बच्चों ने एंजॉय किया. लेकिन जो एक चीज़ मैं यहाँ पे हाईलाइट करना चाहूँगा, जो इसकी आप देखो पावर ऑफ स्टोरी की बात कर रहे हैं, उसमें कराची में एक स्कूल है, मुझे उसका अब एग्जैक्ट नाम भूल रहा है, NWOP या इस तरह उनके वहाँ पे एक इनिशिएटिव है जो कि डिफरेंटली एबल्ड बच्चों के साथ काम करते हैं, और वो उनका स्कूल है, वहाँ बच्चे पढ़ते हैं जिनकी स्पेशल नीड्स हैं. तो वहाँ पे एक सेशन रखा गया और हमारी टीम मेंबर थी, वो वहाँ पे गई. वहाँ पे जाके उन्होंने with the help of their instructor, with the help of the people who teach there, who know the kids, उन्होंने एक स्टोरी बताई. और उसमें आमतौर पे जो होता है वो बच्चे पार्टिसिपेट करते हैं, लेकिन ज़्यादा हंस रहे होते हैं, ज़्यादा वो खिलखिला रहे होते हैं, कभी कभी कुछ रिप्लाई कर देते हैं, ज़्यादा इंटरेस्टिंग स्टोरी सुनने में होते हैं. बट यहाँ पे इन बच्चों के साथ हमने थोड़ा सा डिफरेंट इस तरह किया कि जहाँ पे अगर कोई कौवा आया था, चिड़िया आई थी, परिंदा आया था, शेर आया था, तो उनके साथ हमने थोड़ा सा इनएक्ट करना चाहा. सो दैट वीडियो स्टिल अप ऑन यूट्यूब, बट अगर आप उस सेशन की वीडियो देखें तो उसमें वो बच्चे जिस तरह जो पहले बड़े शाय थे, जो एट टाइम्स आपकी आंखों में आंखें डाल के देख भी नहीं सकते, वो किस तरह रिएक्ट कर रहे हैं, वो किस तरह अपने अंदाज में खुशी का इजहार कर रहे हैं, अपने अपने अंदाज में पार्टिसिपेट कर रहे हैं. सो आई थिंक दैट इज द स्ट्रॉन्गेस्ट स्टेटमेंट अगर आप ऑफ अ गुड स्टोरी टेलिंग सेशन, कि अगर आपके सामने एक स्टोरी टेलर खड़ा है एंड ही इज इनएक्टिंग अ स्टोरी, और उसमें क्या करना है, आप थोड़ा सा मूव करना है, आपने अपनी आवाज़ को, लहजे को, अपने जो है वो बताने के तरीके को, बोलने के तरीकों को वेरी करना है। बट उसमें आप ये देखो कि सामने आपके बैठे हुए बच्चे जिनकी बहुत ज़्यादा चैलेंजेस हैं इन देयर रूटीन लाइफ, दे वर एंजॉयिंग इट एंड दे वर पार्टिसिपेटिंग इट। सो अगेन द पावर ऑफ स्टोरी टेलिंग की हम बात कर रहे थे। और लास्टली जो अब ये 3 एज ग्रुप की बात की हमने, एक हमने बात की स्कूल लेवल बच्चों की जिसमें स्टोरी प्रोग्राम था, देन वी वर टॉक्ड अबाउट कॉमिक्स जो कि 18 to 25 का एज ग्रुप बनता है, एंड ऑब्वियसली दैट गोज बियॉन्ड क्योंकि ओल्ड पीपल लाइक still read comics and we do love comics. So lastly जो है सुखन की, जिस तरह मैंने बात की, जिस तरह आपने शुरू जिक्र किया कि मेरा एक इनिशिएटिव है, उसमें आई एम लकी कि आप सब भी उसमें किसी ना किसी सेशन का पार्ट रहे हैं, and you have seen that we are trying to create a conversation, a discourse around different social issues, different literary topics, mental health की हम बात कर रहे हैं। तो उन सब में एक चीज़ आपको कॉमन नज़र आएगी, वो यही है कि हम जब लाइव बैठते थे तो हमें कमेंट्स मिलते थे, हमें बीच में जो है वो लोग पार्टिसिपेट करते थे, एंड अगेन हम लोग एक डिस्कोर्स अपना अपना सामने लेके आ रहे थे, जो कि हम लोग अभी भी कर रहे हैं। और उसके एंड पे ये होता था कि लोग अपना पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू सामने लाते थे। और अभी भी जो मेरा ख्याल है, सब नंबर्स और क्वांटिटी और क्वांटिटेटिव एनालिसिस, सारी चीज़ें एक जगह रैंडमली पता चलता है मुझे कि a friend of mine who came to my session, one of my sessions, सुखन के ऊपर, और शी इज अ थेरेपिस्ट। तो उसको आके, और हमने वी डिड अ कपल ऑफ एपिसोड्स, पूरी एक सीरीज थी हमारी मेंटल हेल्थ जो भी चल रही है, हम कभी कभी लोगों को बुलाते हैं। सो उसके एक जो है वो जानने वाले तो नहीं कहूँगा मैं, उसके क्लाइंट ने उसको एक सेशन में आके कहा कि अच्छा हाँ, मैंने ये बात, एक बात मैंने यूट्यूब पे एक वीडियो से सीखी थी। तो उसने जनरली पूछा होगा कि अच्छा कौन सी वीडियो है, क्या था उस वीडियो में। तो उसने कहा जी एक इनिशिएटिव है इस तरह, तो वो मेंटल हेल्थ की एक सीरीज चला रहे हैं, तो उसके अंदर मैंने देखा कि फलां थेरेपिस्ट या फलां जो भी हमने एक्सपर्ट बुलाए थे उन्होंने ये बात की। सो दैट रियली हिट अ कॉर्ड विद मी। तो इसलिए मैंने वहां से बात सीखी। अब दोस्त ने तो खैर ऑब्वियसली उसको नहीं बताया कि वो जानती है या वगैरह वगैरह, लेकिन दैट इज द काइंड ऑफ फीडबैक आई लिव फॉर। तो इस लंबी बात हो गई है, बट कहने का मकसद यही है कि डिफरेंट एज ग्रुप्स पे डिफरेंट स्टोरी टेलिंग के मीडियम्स और डिफरेंट नैरेटिव बिल्डिंग का काफी इम्पैक्ट होता है, and all of you guys are doing amazing work in your own fields, and I'm sure it's having an impact.
Yeah, so thank you for wrapping this part of our conversation really well. And I think सबने जो अपना experience share किया from your different uh, professional backgrounds and सारा कुछ, it all sort of chips into the main theme that I'm trying to sort of communicate through this platform, that storytelling has such a broad scope and it is capable of touching everybody in मतलब because the एक idea जो है storytelling का एक stereotypical किस्म का कि when you mention the term it's like अच्छा बच्चों के साथ कुछ करना है, but no, it's something that sort of inbuilt into sort of our way of life कह लो, and be it any culture and any sort of socio-economic background, any educational uh, segment, and you can see कि storytelling का जो है impact, it's sort of an equalizing uh, impact होता है उसका, and that is what my understanding is from whatever work I have been involved in. So to wrap up this conversation, I will have each one of you on a separate individual podcast where we can sort of dig deep into each and every separate segment of storytelling that you guys connect with the most. But just to wrap up this generic conversation that we have been having, uh, I would like that you guys each share a book, a film, a song, and if it applies, if that is something that you guys connect with, even if it's a photograph, that sort of is something that you can revisit again and again, and which has a sort of a meaning to you. Arusa, you can start.
So, Fatma, I think, I mean, these days I'm fixated with a book I recently finished. And I think I can't say it with क्या कहना चाहिए for वो जो होता है ना for all times ever वाली label के साथ, but of course this is something that relates to me on so many levels. There's this book, Are Women on the Ground? And it's basically a collection of essays by Arab women journalists who have been reporting from conflict zones within the Arab world. And so these are stories or essays of 19 women journalists. So इसमें जो जो चीज मुझे बहुत ज्यादा रिलेटेबल लगी थी, जो पिछले उसमें हम बात भी कर रहे थे, आपने पूछा था कि professionally how does storytelling relate to you, and um, एक limitation रह जाती है कि when you report as a journalist there's only so much you can say, या so there's a limitation in the way you express or present the story, because वो जो एक ऑब्जेक्टिविटी वाला एलिमेंट आता है या बार बार आपको रिस्ट्रेन करने को कहा जाता है और आप करते भी हैं, उसकी वजह से वो जो एक होती है ना, वो एक स्टोरी टेलिंग की फील होती है और एक मतलब एक एक रिलेटेबिलिटी होती है, वो कभी कभार हैम्पर हो जाती है उससे। लेकिन इस बुक में मुझे द थिंग दैट ट्रूली कनेक्टेड मी वाज दिस amazing storytelling, because these were 19 women journalists who were telling their stories, and they were telling their stories of them covering other stories from various conflict zones. You're just being a journalist in the Arab world. Yeah, their stories of being a journalist as Arab women. So वो जो एक चीज होती है ना, वो जो अक्सर कहते हैं behind the scenes वाली चीज. So I felt that coming from this book. So it I think it's a fascinating read, even for someone who's not associated with the profession. It sort of gives you this human side to journalists, especially women journalists. उनकी क्या challenges होते हैं, उनकी क्या struggles होते हैं, कहाँ से आ रहे होते हैं. When they cover a story, how difficult it is for them to disconnect at certain point, even though it may be, in certain instances, as a human, you would feel, agitated by doing so, but like it sort of, it's a good insight into that. एक और चीज जो मुझे अभी recently मुझे पता चला था, स्ट्रिंग्स का जो बहुत पुराना गाना है जिसपे मेरे हाथ हम लोग recently भी बात कर रहे थे, सर की है ये पहाड़. अच्छा, so I've been listening to this ever since I was a child. I did not know, okay, yeah, apart from the fact, this, it's like, जिसे मैं आजकल कहती हूँ, this is like this ultimate love anthem. But so I was listening to this live rendition of the song by Strings, and so Bilal Maqsood, before performing the song, comes onto the stage and tells the backstory. कि भाई ये this, 28, I think 23 or 28 odd years ago, I wrote this song for this person who's also present was also present in the audience at the time. And so, it sort of helped me reconnect. Oh my God. So, it sort of connects the dot कि आपको एक चीज जो आपको आर्टिस्टिकली बड़ी जबरदस्त लग रही होती है और उसकी भी एक बैक स्टोरी होती है, स्टोरी की भी एक बैक स्टोरी होती है. वो जब से मैंने सुना है, so it connects on an altogether different level, because then I did this math and I figured out that I was hardly 9 or 10 when this song was first written. Yet somehow it has always been part of my childhood and my teenage years, and even as this, middle-aged adult, I always feel so. There was this. There's another book I'm reading these days. It's called Something to Live For. So it's basically this book about a council worker who's supposed to visit all those people who die alone. So there's no one, who could sort of, no family or friends who could do the burial or take care of the last rites. So it's interesting because so the author is Richard Roper, and there's a small note before the story begins, and it's a note by the author, and it's apparently the story is inspired from this actual article Richard Roper read in a newspaper. जिसमें ये था कि जी council workers जो हैं, it was on council workers who were supposed to visit the dead, those dead who who were all alone, and there were no family and friends to sort of take care of their burial rites and everything. So it was interesting because इसमें exactly वही वाली बात, there was this backstory to the story he was telling, and so that story coming from the author, that he was actually inspired to write the story because he read a piece in the newspaper about such council workers who actually by law they are required to take care of burials and the documentation and property and all other things of such people who die alone. So it was very fascinating. It's actually a very dark comic sort of a novel, but है कितनी fascinating चीज है कि I think पता नहीं क्यों मुझे I found it very interesting कि I was more fascinated by the author's story of being pulled into writing this novel. Okay. So I think ये जो स्टोरी टेलिंग वाली चीज थी हमारी, ये एक अनएंडिंग एक लूप चलता रहता है कि हर चीज की एक स्टोरी, एंड देन you eventually get a chance to tell your story or someone else tells that story. So yeah.
आई थिंक एक वो जो जरूसा बात करी थी कि मुश्किल होता है कि आप कहें कि समथिंग दैट स्टेज फॉर एवर, बट लकीली आई हैव टू series that I've read, and I still love them, and I always go back to them. First one is Ibn Safi's Imran series. Ibn Safi was Pakistan's best-selling author during his time, and I think probably still is, क्योंकि हमारी books का जो record है इतना ही है. बट जनरली वो एक ऐसी सीरीज है जिसको आप अगर देखोगे, आप पढ़ोगे, इट वाज रिटन इन 50s एंड 60s, और इट नेवर स्पेसिफिकली मेंशंस पाकिस्तान, बट वो जो दिखा रहे हैं एक मुल्क है, उसमें कराची है, उसमें लाहौर की बात हो रही है, इस तरह नाम लेके बात नहीं हो रही, बट डिस्क्रिप्शन से आपको अंदाजा हो सकता है. बट जो इम्पोर्टेंट या इंटरेस्टिंग बात उसमें ये है कि उसमें एंटी बैलिस्टिक मिसाइल का जिक्र है, उसमें रोबोट्स जो हैं वो कर रहे हैं, ऑपरेशंस कर रहे हैं, वो जो आपके ट्रैफिक सिग्नल्स हैं वो ऑटोमेटिकली कंट्रोल हो रहे हैं, और ये सारी बातें मैं आपको बता रहा हूँ 60s की. उस टाइम एंटी बैलिस्टिक मिसाइल एग्जिस्ट भी नहीं करते थे. सो दैट शोज कि वो एक ऐसा कंटेंट था जो कि स्टोरी टेलिंग में आपके फॉर्म में आपको दिया गया, लेकिन वो विजनरी कंटेंट था जिसमें हम बात करते हैं कि जब जहाज बनने से पहले एजी वेल्स और सारी पुरानी जो हम बात करते हैं. सो तो इमरान सीरीज इज वन ऑफ दोस थिंग्स जो व्हिच हैज स्टेड विद मी थ्रू आउट ऑल दीज इयर्स. एंड सेकेंडली तिलिस्म हो शुबा, जो कि उस पूरी दास्तान का नाम है, और उसके आगे 2 पार्ट्स हैं. वन इज कॉल्ड तिलिस्म हो शुबा एंड द अदर वन इज कॉल्ड दास्तान अमीर हमजा. सो उसमें वो भी इट हैज बीन रिटन ओवर एंड ओवर अगेन थ्रू आउट द हिस्ट्री. 1880s में कहीं ये स्टार्ट हुई थी, पहली जो हमें डॉक्यूमेंटेड इसकी मिलती है किताब, बट उसके बाद से ये किताब बहुत दफ़ा लिखी जा चुकी है. इस सीरीज फिरोज सन्स की जो बच्चों की किताबें हैं उसमें 50-60 पेजेस के नावल से लेके बहुत ह्यूज साइज की, यानी A3 साइज की, अगर आप 40 जिल्दों की बात करें तो वो बात भी उसमें आती है. बट और भी मुझे जब भी पता लगता है कि हमारे पास एक नया इसका किसी का कोई पुराना नुस्खा मिला है या कहीं से कोई इसकी फॉर्म मिली है, तो आई डू गो बैक एंड read it, क्योंकि grew up reading Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and all those stuff. but अगर आप उसमें तिलिस्म शुबा का भी मुशर्रफ अली फारूकी की किताब का किया भी था इंग्लिश तर्जुमा, आई विश इट हैड कंटिन्यूड, बट अगर आप उसको प्रेजेंट करें टुवर्ड्स बाहर दुनिया में तो पता चलेगा कि कितना रिच कंटेंट हमारे पास पड़ा हुआ है. रिसेंट टाइम में जो एक अच्छी किताब है स्टोरी टेलिंग के पर्सपेक्टिव से, वो थी जो मैंने आपको कहा था किस्सा गोई का था, द बुक एंड द मर्मन एंड द बुक ऑफ पावर. लास्ट ईयर आई थी 2019 में, but by मुशर्रफ अली फारूकी. It's a very strong book. It basically brings back the traditional किस्सा गोई. और अगर हम सॉन्ग्स पे जाएंगे, जिससे अरूसा बात करेंगे, फिर तो आई थिंक एक बहुत ही अनलिमिटेड स्कोप है. सो आई थिंक आई स्टिक विद दीज 3.
आई थिंक हाँ 90s के बच्चे जो है ना, हमारा एक स्पेसिफिक जॉनर ऑफ म्यूजिक है, वो कुछ इट्स लाइक ऑल टाइम favorites हैं, and then there is few songs जो अब we might say कि they should not be there, but again we love them, we still love them, and we still have them in our memory. And for anyone wondering कि when Hammad was speaking, to if you were confused that were you actually hearing a baby, so yeah, you were hearing a baby. That's Hammad's daughter, and I have the credit. Mixtape has the credit because that's her a sort of debut on podcasting. So yes, despite the fact that Hammad has a separate podcast series, but I get to have that debut. So yeah, that's about it. So I'm like claiming Fupo credits on this front.
बिल्कुल 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 वो एग्री कर रही हैं आपसे, जो हमारी बेबी हैं, और उन्होंने कहा इनको बहुत खुशी का इजहार किया आप इस बात पे हाथ हिला के.
बस ठीक है. So like yeah, so I am this is gonna stay a very interesting first episode. So Shanal, your turn. Share what are these specific favorite things from the ones we are discussing that you have on your list.
But for me, I think there's so many, but I'm just going to stick to one that I found really, really like a very bizarre kind of the minute you asked this question, it just popped in my mind. It is a song which is written by Bob Dylan, and it's been kind of performed by Jimi Hendrix and a lot of people, actually a lot of people over the years. It's called All Along the Watchtower. And it's such a crazy, bizarre song that just comes out of nowhere. And I remember listening to it जब मैं maybe 7-8 सालों की थी, or my dad's or mom's, or maybe their collective tapes or whatever, गाड़ी में लगाया हुआ था. And it's one of the longest songs, you know, in the world, I guess, in that sense, lyrical sense. And it's one of the only songs that doesn't follow like any kind of lyric, any kind of song, like, just constraints. Yeah, a song ka ek mold hota hai, you have verses and you have a chorus and you have verses and a chorus. This is just literally just a bunch of absurd rubbish. He's just compiled probably on several hallucinogens, and I don't know what it is, but it's a whole story. And like I mean, I'm just obviously not going to sing the entire song at this point. I'm just going to probably just read out what the first 3 lines or verses is. It starts off with, there must be some kind of way out of here, said the Joker to the thief. And that entire song is about this 7, 8, 9 minute long conversation between this Joker and a thief. Or in doing that, I always found that song like, yeah, they're both sitting at a bar and crazy things are happening. There's a street cat coming in, there's something happening. They're talking about castles, they're talking about princess. None of it makes sense when you're a child. But whenever I listen to it now, I think of it as like, why is it called All Along the Watchtower? And it kind of makes it's such an interesting way, because this guy actually didn't just randomly spurt out a song because he felt, the need to do it. But it's kind of like a story of a conversation, which is kind of bizarre, that a joker and a thief are having. And it kind of represents like the jokers in life and then the thieves in life, those kind of people, like the good, like the funny and the bad, or the funny and evil and whatever. And the joker is talking about, all the funny things in life and how they're ironically funny. And then the thief is talking about, kya mischief hai or kya darkness hai, and is castle ke piche ye hai, and all of that. And it's kind of like a representation of good or bad now that I think about it. And it's a really interesting song, and it's the only song I know that actually tells a story from the beginning to the end. Like, it doesn't just say one thing, but it just tells a whole story. It's like a story, but it's in a song form. And it's pretty crazy, because if you listen to it, Jimi Hendrix's guitar is also really crazy in that, because that mimics the way that whole idea of bizarrety of this conversation. He's also kind of really going crazy at the guitar, and the Joker and the thief are both having a conversation, and it doesn't make any sense, but yet they are. When I think about it, and I read, if I listen to it now, and obviously read the lyrics of, okay, what is this even about? What are they even talking about? After I reached a certain age, I realized that no, they're talking about the world. Like, the world is like, we always divide into two parts, good and evil, bad and good, all that kind of stuff. And one part, the Joker represents one part and the thief represents the other, and they're both trying to give their justification for being alive and being there, and so it's just somehow I find it really interesting, like, since I was a kid, that particular song. So that for me is that, apart from all the other things that they are there.
Yeah, so again, the reason I specifically mentioned music, because as we said, we have these general, modified versions of storytelling, and music is also a key form of storytelling. Vajiha, your turn.
I can, I can think of so many things, so many books that I love, but and so many books that have had an impact on me. But I think, I'd have to, go with The Picture of Dorian Gray. I talk so much about it. It seems like it is probably the only book that I have ever read, but, I can't help it. I fell in love with this book, the first time I read it, and it now I read it almost every other year, and in winter, and it's almost like a ritual. I find something. I find something new every time I open its pages. So that's almost a staple. In music, God, I have so many favorites. So in music, I think anything by David Bowie, perhaps, because his music has had the ability to lift me up even on my weirdest Strangers Days. Photographs. I can't really think of any favorite pictures or photographs right now, but yeah, I was talking about Instagram. I think, those cozy autumnal pictures on Instagram, instant pick me up. I love them. And maybe, photographs of New York City in winter, especially during snowfall. So those are just everything. So yeah, this is about it, I think.
An interesting aspect of storytelling that has sort of been highlighted with all that you guys have shared is the fact that it needs to be representative of the life's shade of gray. It can't just be black and white, because those sort of stories not always connect with people. And it will be interesting, and we'll try to sort of dig deeper into these shades of gray of storytelling, and their impact in future episodes. And with that, I would like to thank all of my guests and all of you who sort of tuned in, and hopefully we will see you around for the next episode of Mixtape.